All right, well, to talk more about what is happening in Syria, we're joined now by Omar Abu Layla. He's the Executive Director of Deir ez-Zor 24. Welcome to you, Omar. We're also joined by Giran Ozkan. He's the Executive Director of the Kurdish Peace Institute. Welcome to you, Giran, as well. So, Omar, I'll start with you. No one is disputing that Syrians have suffered greatly under the dictator Bashar al-Assad for many years, but many are asking whether we should be cheering on the rebels when there are clearly Islamist, jihadist elements among them. Can you talk us through that?
Thank you so much, Laura, for having me again. It's not necessary the Syrian shows support for these groups, including like Islamic groups or other groups, more than they feel like we give up after 13 years. And although we're just watching what's going on the ground in Syria, Bashar al-Assad in the last years and months got more support, internationally support, and trying to show that I am the real president of this country. So this operation happened in a time the Syrians has no decision to stop it or not, more than like we need any faction, any group on the ground to kick this regime away of our towns, which occupied by the Iranian-backed militia, by Hezbollah, by the IRGC, and by the Assad regime. And this is what happened in the past 2-3 days. Like millions of the Syrians inside Idlib and the countryside of Aleppo returning soon to their towns after this, what happened in Aleppo. So the people saying like, it's not a matter of 3 weeks, 3 months, or 3 years, it's 13 years. And we were waiting to kick this regime away, and at least we back to our towns and villages.
Okay, Omar, thank you. Giran, let me bring you in because we are getting reports that the Islamists and the Kurdish forces are coming into conflict in some areas. We've got some pretty distressing footage going around on social media, no way of verifying it, of some of these Islamists taking Kurdish female fighters hostage. Are you worried about the fate of the Kurds in Syria?
Hi, Laura. Yes, very worried. Right now, as you quite rightly mentioned, the footage coming out is very depressing and concerning because on the one side, we have a Syrian regime who has killed hundreds of thousands, and yet on the other side, we have Islamist jihadist forces that are willing to do the same thing to people that don't agree with them. So, you know, the international community needs to rid itself of this approach whereby they have to pick a lesser of two evils, because both are evil in their approach to the whole crisis in the country. And the Kurds find themselves now fighting on multiple fronts because they suffer from the Syrian regime, they suffer from the Islamists that are spreading across northwestern Syria right now, and they suffer from the Turkish state's ambitions, who, as you said in your report, are the underwriters of this latest offensive. So the videos and the messaging that's coming out of northwest Syria right now, and in Aleppo specifically, where there is a sizable Kurdish population, and also the small town of Tel Rifat that has now been encircled by these jihadist forces backed by Turkey. The Kurds are bracing for a humanitarian catastrophe any moment.
Omar, how would you respond to that? The Kurds are bracing for a humanitarian catastrophe. I mean, are the Kurds, are other minorities like Christians safe in Syria as these opposition forces advance?
Let's be a bit fair, to be honest with you. I'm not here supporting any group in Syria, in northeast or northwest or in anywhere, more than to support civilians and protect them. So they do have the right to protect their population, people in the countryside of Aleppo or in anywhere, absolutely. But at the same time, I just saw an official statement from these Syrian opposition factions. They offered the SDF to withdraw from the countryside of Aleppo to Raqqa and northeast Syria, and their right is the same right to others, as they mentioned today also in a footage with the Christian people inside Aleppo and other. So they have something. I do believe this is a pressure, and this is something pushed by Turkey on these groups, that you must be fair with all the people in Aleppo, in the countryside of Aleppo or Idlib also. But it doesn't mean that there is no violation. Absolutely, we have witnessed many violations in the past years from these groups, especially from the national army or the faction supported directly by Turkey. Also, we did not witness a lot of conflict between Hayat Tahrir Sham and the SDF in the past years. So the most tension between these groups, it's between the SDF and between the national army, which is supported by Turkey. And hopefully this time it's something different, because I see they are focusing on the main enemy, which is Bashar al-Assad and the Iranian-backed militia, more than to get in conflict. It happened somehow in the past hours in Tel Rafat and some other towns. But at the same time, they offered them that you withdraw with your weapons, with your tanks, safely to northeast Syria. No one will stop you. At the same time, we have to finish our battle against Assad regime.
All right, thank you, Omar. Giran, your response to that, and what are the Kurds planning going forward? I mean, is there an expectation that this could be a long, prolonged, drawn-out conflict? There is something of a power vacuum in Syria right now. And what about the United States? We've had a kind of ambiguous statement with the US saying that they're not involved in the current situation. Are you concerned that the US might withdraw support for the Kurds, as President Trump did during his first term?
Laura, I believe Omar is referencing a statement that was released by Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, which is the former affiliate, the Al-Qaeda affiliate in Syria. And so I don't know how much we can believe a statement made by an organization that has in its past, and up until very recently in the places that it's controlling, has abused human rights all over the place, has beheaded Kurdish civilians in front of camera. So I don't know how much we can take that statement seriously at this point. But it also does say one thing, that an Al-Qaeda affiliate in the country is actually behaving more pragmatically than Turkish-backed organizations and Turkish-backed jihadists who are attacking Kurdish towns right now. That is a worrying development, and shows that Turkey's priority is not so much regime change, it's not so much pushing back against Assad or liberating areas in Syria. It is predominantly their primary objective is to push back against the Kurds, is to diminish any kind of Kurdish political articulation in the region. And our past experience, the Kurdish people's past experience in Syria, shows that they can't trust any jihadist organization that claims that they will respect their dignity and human rights. We've seen in places like Afrin, in places like Tel Abyad, where Turkish-backed forces have tortured, murdered, and raped Kurdish civilians. So that, to me, at this point, it's too early to say. But coming to your second question, yes, the US's position is going to be very important. As of yet, they made a very late statement, relatively speaking, to where these developments exploded about 4 days ago, and we only just got a statement from the National Security Council here in the US. The northwest of Syria isn't a place in which the Americans are present. And I believe, strategically speaking for them, they haven't prioritized this part of Syria. And I don't expect much to be done there on behalf of the Americans. But okay, I would add here that a fundamentalist conflict in this part of the country, where Sunni jihadists are pushing back against Assad, will bring in more Iranian proxies and Iranian military personnel themselves, and will turn the country into a more unstable part for the whole region, and especially Israel and the West.
All right, Giran, thank you very much. Omar, I'll bring you back in. I mean, it doesn't look as though Bashar al-Assad is going to go quietly. He's meeting right now with the Iranian foreign minister in Damascus. I mean, given the brutal tactics that we've seen from his regime, coupled with the Russian Air Force and the Iranian proxy militias, are you concerned that there could be a very swift retribution for what's happened over the past few days?
I think the area that Bashar al-Assad and its force with the Iranian-backed militia, they lost in the past 3 days or 4 days, they cannot get it back easily. Because if you look to the factions, how much weapons they controlled and got in Aleppo, in the countryside of Idlib, and even around Hama, it shows you exactly this military operation is a huge military operation. Even Bashar al-Assad cannot handle it, because the Syrian army or Bashar al-Assad's force were mostly in the past years relying on the Russian air covers more in these battles, but this time they were alone. That's why you saw how these factions quickly they controlled one of the hugest province in Syria, like Aleppo. So I don't expect a lot, whatever. They are gonna to launch absolutely massive airstrikes against civilians in these cities. We expect the scenario, but at the same time, I do believe they cannot get back what they lost.